What's up guys, my name is Jose, aka Joe Engineer, and today I'm going to show you how to do a valve adjustment on an air-cooled 911 with an air-cooled flat 6 engine. We will be doing this on my old 1983 911 SC with a 3-liter normally aspirated flat 6 engine. Pardon the dustiness of the car, it's been sitting on jack stands for the better part of a year. This process should apply to all air-cooled flat 6 911s from 1965 all the way to 1998 through the 993 generation, and everything in between, as long as it has a flat 6. So let's get to it. Step one, first thing you got to do is you have to turn it on and let it get up to operating temperature, because it needs to get really hot in order for the oil thermostat to open and allow all of the engine oil to drain out, including all the oil that's in the front oil cooler that has to go out the oil cooler lines through the thermostat and down into the oil tank and the sump. So get it started, get it running, get it hot, drain the oil. Alrighty, let's see if this thing starts. It's been a few months since it last started, but I just put some fresh gas in it. All right, here we go. Look at that. A bit low on gas, but fired right up. Oil is at operating temp. Time to drain it now. Oh yeah. That's right. Most violent oil change ever. It's 10 quarts of really hot oil. Next thing you gotta do is, once the oil is drained, put the plugs back on, the drain plugs on both the oil tank and the sump, and let the car cool overnight, because you can't adjust valves on a hot car. It needs to be stone cold. After draining the oil, put the rear end on jack stands if you haven't already done so. You can take off the rear wheels just to have a little more access to stuff. Remove your oil filter so you have access on this side over here. And the easiest way to explain what exactly we're going to do is to look at the decals on the back of the car in the engine compartment. Hopefully you can see these pretty clearly. And what we're essentially going to do is turn the engine over, move it to top dead center. We're going to adjust the gap on the intake and the exhaust valve for that cylinder. And if you haven't already, if you weren't already familiar with the way the engine is set up, these engines have the cylinders pointing that way. So all the valve train is on the outsides. And this is kind of a cross section here of the head. Your cylinder, your piston is over here going up and down. This is a cross section of the head, and with the intake valve on top, the exhaust valve on the bottom, you can see the cam, the single cam here in the middle, turns around and activates each of the rockers. And as it touches the rockers, the rocker will push on the end of the valve and open it and close it. And on these cars, it is required to have a gap of 0.1 millimeters or 0.004 thousandths of an inch while the engine is cold. And that gap is between the end of the valve and the adjusting screw. And the reason we do that is because when the engine is cold, you want to have that gap, but as the engine warms up to operating temperature and everything expands thermally, that gap is going to be taken up. And that gap, if you set the valve clearance to that gap, then you'll have the best condition to make sure that the valves will open and close properly during the combustion cycle. They will open as far as they need to let the engine breathe in and out, and they'll close. They'll be fully seated and closed in order to achieve full compression during each compression stroke. So as you can imagine, the intake valve is up here, exhaust valve is down here. So you have separate valve covers, one up here in the engine bay and one down here below the car. So you can see in here that if you look at my engine bay, there's the right intake valve cover, and here is the left intake valve cover. And on the bottom of the car, you can see the exhaust ones. That one, and then the one on the other side as well. The parts that you will need to complete this job are a valve cover gasket kit. This is the part number for all cars from 1964-65 all the way up to 1989, the F body and G body cars. And typically this kit comes with 4 identical valve cover paper gaskets, and then it comes with all of the nylock nuts and crush washers that you use to attach each one of the valve covers onto the cam tower. And some of them even come with this a pair of the big crush washers for the drain plugs for the oil tank and the sump. But this part number should have the entire kit, and you can get these from any European parts supplier store. Make sure that you always use a new set of gaskets, as well as new nylocks and new crush washers in order to avoid getting any leaks through the valve covers. So it's very important that you replace these every single time that you open them up. As far as the tools that you will need to do the valve adjustment, number one, you will need a service manual for your car. The reason why is that every single car has differences in the intake and exhaust equipment, as well as the heating and air conditioning stuff that's in the engine bay. So there are differences in the things that you need to move out of the way in order to get access to the valve covers and the valves themselves. But the basic procedure of how to adjust the valves is applicable for all cars. So get your manual, because it'll tell you how to do that for your specific car. As far as the tools themselves to do the valve adjustment, you don't need very much. You need preferably the wrench that came in your factory toolkit to turn the engine over, and this turns the crank pulley or the fan pulley. We'll see in a second, but it turns. You use this wrench to turn your engine over. Additionally, and again, this one is a 24 millimeter socket. If you don't have one of these, you can also use a ratchet and a 24 millimeter socket if it's short enough. You will also need a 13 millimeter hex wrench, preferably a 6.1, not a 12.1, so that you don't strip the hex features on the lock nuts for the adjustment screws when you adjust the valves. You will also need a stubby flathead screwdriver, the shorter the better, so that you can hold the adjustment screw, turn it to proper gap, and then lock the nuts down with the wrench. They make a separate tool that has both the screwdriver and the wrench integrated, but it's kind of big and cumbersome, and that's more so for engine builders or people that have the engine out of the car. Then you can get access to everything. But because you were working with the engine in the car, the little stubby screwdriver is the easiest one to get everywhere that you need to get. Also, to set the valve gap on every single intake and exhaust valve, you will need a 4/1000 feeler gauge, preferably in this type of shape. This little, so you can get into tight corners and shove this in the gap and measure it and make sure that it's the correct gap. You can't use the long straight ones, the typical feeler gauges that come in a long set of blades, like the ones you can get at AutoZone or any of your local auto parts stores. Those don't. You need this bend in order to get in there. But I think this is like a $10 tool on, for example, on Pelican parts. So it's not really that big of a deal to just get one of these. Usually they come with extra blades so that in case your blade gets mangled up, you can replace it. I actually have never replaced this blade. It's kind of messed up from all the different valve adjustments that I've done, but it still does the job. And another quick note on this is that there are many companies out there that sell all these crazy valve adjustment tools so that you could adjust the valves from the back, from the front. There's different ways to lock the screw down, turn it exactly 4 turns so that you take advantage of the thread pitch and you set the gap to exactly 4/1000 of an inch. There's all these different things and accessories that they try to sell you to do a valve adjustment, but I'm here to tell you that it's not that difficult to do. Just buy this feeler gauge and I will show you exactly how to use it. It takes a little bit of practice, but it's not that bad. And yeah, you can do it. And also, another helpful tool is a little mirror if you happen to have one. It's not required, but some of the valves get a little, sometimes I think on the valves that are closest to the firewall, it's going to get a little tight back there. And if you want to see what you're doing, then one of these little mirrors will help very well. But this is pretty much the bare minimum that you will need for tools to do the actual valve adjustment itself. Okay, to ease everyone's apprehensions about setting a 4/1000 valve gap, you can practice out of the car by
doing something like this. Take your 4/1000 feeler gauge, take a set of calipers. Doesn't have to be digital ones. You can get some cheap $10 ones from Amazon or wherever, or micrometer or whatever. Set the gap to 4/1000 of an inch. Four thousandths of an inch gap. So what you want to do is, once you set that gap, this is the perfect gap on each of the valves. You want to slide the feeler gauge through and feel the way it drags across the metal surfaces. That slight drag, that's the proper gap on a feeler gauge. If the gap was smaller, the blade wouldn't even go in, or it would just get stuck and not want to come out. If the gap was bigger, it would just move in and out freely. Even if it was 5/1000ths, it would just move in and out freely, and you wouldn't get this dragging, the dragging of metal on metal. That's what you have to practice. If you can practice this a few times, see how it feels, that's the feeling that you're going for on when you're doing the valve adjustment. And it's pretty darn accurate. If you want to make it even more accurate, or put a dab of engine oil on your feeler gauge, since you're working with valve train components that are covered in engine oil, and everything's going to have a light coating of oil on it. Then repeat the same test. It's going to be the same, but maybe a little slipperier. But I hope you can hear that in the camera, because this means this equals a great gap, and it's going to guide you through. You want to shoot for that on every single valve, especially on some valves where you might not get a clear, you might not be able to see the gap. You're going to have to go by feel, especially because you're going to be, most likely the valve is going to be pointing right at you like this axially. So you're going to insert the feeler gauge like this, and it's going to make that sliding noise. So try this, and if you understand what that feels like and are comfortable with it, then you can proceed with just using this tool. If you still want to go ahead and use one of those other fancy schmancy accessories to set the gap, whatever, then that's fine. Those work too. But I'm telling you that the most reliable and easiest way to set the valve gap is like this. And this is an easy way to learn how to do it properly.
Now going back to the car itself, as I had mentioned before, every car is going to be a little bit different in terms of what stuff you have to move out of the way to get access to the valve covers. This is an 83 SC with a stock CIS fuel injection system. However, in this car, the AC system has been removed. So normally you would have a big blower motor here and a hose obscuring this over here. So you'd have to remove all of that to get into the access to the valve cover. And then normally there'd be a big AC compressor here that you would have to unbolt, leave the hoses still connected, but unbolt, and then you would have to put on like a fender protector cover, and you would hang the compressor out here so that you can get access to the valve cover. But in my case, I have quite a bit of space, so there's not much that I need to do here. But check your manual so that you know how to get access to the valve covers on your car. Next, all you need to do is remove the spark plug wires so that you can
get the valve covers off. If you don't want to think about where the wires go afterwards, you can go ahead and label them per the cylinder location. That way you can just pop them off and then afterwards pop them back on and take the labels off when you're done. So I've already done that. Just move these out of the way. They should come off pretty easily. You can just tuck them right there. Same thing on the other side. This one. Alrighty. Then you can go ahead and start taking off the valve covers. You can see the nuts are all right here, so take all those nuts and the sealing washers that are directly below them, the crush washers, and put them in a little bin and very carefully pop these valve covers off. I did want to mention that on the valve covers and critical oil sealing surfaces of the engine, I don't like to use power tools. Like, I don't want to get in here with an air ratchet and just zap, zap, zap. I just don't want to run the risk of accidentally stripping something or, you know, breaking something. So I prefer to take my time and just make sure that these parts can come on and off without any drama, and as safely as possible. Fortunately, these aren't very tight, so it should be very easy to take them off. Also, when you get to the bottom valve covers, the bottom ones will have some oil in them and they'll leak, so make sure you put a drain pan underneath each one. Let's see, the upper valve covers have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 nuts, and then they come off. So as you can see, I didn't really struggle getting those off. Here's one valve cover. And repeat the same process on the other side. This is what it looks like with the valve cover removed. And you can see that the paper gasket is right there, which you can very easily pull off. And you can see immediately that the rockers for the intake valves are right there. See if I can light this up for you guys. There's going to be one right here, another one here, and another one over, oh, can't see with my camera here, but yeah, that's where you're going to be doing the adjustment. Okay, top two covers are done. Now I'm going to do the lower right side, and before I pull this apart, I want you to see how dry it is under here, meaning that I don't have any valve cover gasket leaks. These were put on dry with no sealant or glue or goop of any kind, and the dry gaskets did their job. So I have other leaks that I need to worry about, like in the case, I think down the middle of the case seam. But for our purposes for this video, this just shows that, you know, putting the gaskets on dry on some clean mating surfaces is the way to go. You will also notice that these lower valve covers have a lot more nuts holding them on than the upper ones, but they're all the same size and they're all easily accessible. So get an oil pan under here, because you may start dripping a little bit of oil from the bottom of the engine on this side, and take them off the same way. Valve cover off, and here are the lower right side exhaust valves in all their glory. There's one right there, one right there, and another one right there. Pretty easy to access. Take the gasket off, and you can see where the oil leaked onto my exhaust heat exchanger there. Make sure you wipe that up so that it doesn't turn into smoke once you run your engine again. But go. Paper gasket off. You can also see that this is where the oil drain tubes from the sump connect. They connect to the sump and the cam towers here. So oil that gets sprayed onto the cam and valve train will drain through those tubes back to the sump, where it will get picked up by the oil pump. And same process on the other side. There's a bunch of hoses here in the way, but they shouldn't get in the way of the valve adjustment process. Just, you can ignore that. You can take them off if you want to, but we don't really need to. Moving on to the lower left side valve cover. Things are a little tighter over here because typically on smog era cars you have a big old catalytic converter like I do here. You can remove it to get access, to improve access, but you shouldn't have to. There's quite a decent amount of clearance between it, so you can get in there and get the valve cover off and get in there and do your adjustment. Also, like the other side, it's pretty dry under here, so you can see that the gasket has done its job. Let's take this valve cover off now. All right, so on the left lower valve cover, if you have your smog stuff still on, you may, like your catalytic converter, you may run in, or a test pipe or something, you may run into a situation where this flange is not allowing the cover to clear the stud so that you can pull it out. See, it's kind of stuck. So what you can do is take the exhaust, has a crossover pipe. This pipe, see these two pipes, this one and this one? Well, this one, the upper one, has 3 bolts that hold its flange to this giant flange out here. And if you loosen them, like I just did here, loosen all 3 of them, and now you can get a little pry bar in here and pry not on the valve cover, but behind the valve cover on the cam tower itself, the casting. You can scooch this over enough so that that flange moves out of the way and allows the valve cover to drop. I can't show it to you on camera because I have to hold the camera up here and I don't have a third hand to take the valve cover off, but yeah, that's what you can do. So you leave them loose. You can take the valve cover off, and then afterwards, once you do the valve adjustment and you put the valve cover back on and everything's torqued together, then you can tighten these guys back up. There you go. Did the little scooching of the pipe trick, and then I was able to maneuver the valve cover off these last 2 studs. And that's how you do it. Now you take off this gasket and you'll have all 4 valve covers open and ready to start the valve adjustment process. Okay, so finally, with all 4 valve covers off, next step we got to do is to put the engine in top dead center for cylinder number 1. And the way you do that is you're gonna grab your 24 millimeter socket and ratchet, or the wrench from the toolkit, and using the nut on the fan pulley. Actually, you need to make sure the transmission is in neutral, because you're going to be spinning turning the engine over, and you want to make sure that the wheels and transmission aren't fighting that. So with the transmission in neutral, you want to go ahead and turn the engine over clockwise, not counterclockwise. If you ever turn it counterclockwise, you run the risk of damaging your timing chains and the tensioners, so don't ever do that. You will only turn it clockwise. And what you're looking for is, you're looking for a mark on the pulley that says Z1. And you're supposed to line it up with this notch on the fan housing, which you can see right here. And the seam on the 2 engine case halves. In our case, the Z1 mark is right, I'm not sure if you can see it in the camera, but it's right there, right where the end of the screwdriver is pointing. And right in front of it is the 5 degrees before top dead center mark. And this is a timing mark, so we're going to ignore this one. We want this to point with this. However, we've already overshot it, so I got to spin the engine around, go clockwise all the way around, and get it up to here, and then compare it with the position of the rotor on our distributor. The Bentley manual states that you should not remove the spark plugs to make the engine turn easier, because carbon deposits that have built up on the end of the plug can fall between the valve and the valve seat when the plug is removed, and this can result in an inaccurate valve adjustment. So we're not going to remove the plugs. You just have to kind of fight the compression of the engine a little bit. If you run into a situation where you're turning the fan and the belt is slipping and not allowing the engine pulley to turn over, then it's probably time for you to readjust the tension on your fan belt anyway, by taking this nut off and adjusting the amount of shims that you have in here and doing the deflection test. That's all in the Bentley manual, so I'm not really going to get into it here, but that's one thing you can do to get the belt at the correct tension again. Otherwise, as you're turning the fan, the alternator nut here, you can also use your hands to to use the fan blades to give you additional leverage. You can grab the belt and gently pull on it to get you to turn the engine over as you're fighting the compression of the cylinders. So once you've cranked the engine over clockwise, stop when you get the Z1 notch. I hope you can see it on the camera. The Z1 notch lined up with the notch on the fan housing and the 2 halves of the case. Here we are, and stop when it's there, and then you come over here and you pop off your distributor cap, because we want to make sure that we actually are at top dead center. And to do that, pop off 2 clips on the distributor cap. Mine's a little tough to get off because it's got all these ground wires and things attached to it. And here's what you are going to look for. The distributor rotor here needs to be pointing at a notch on the distributor that indicates cylinder 1. And that notch is actually over here. It's a little tough to see, but the notch we are looking for is right here where I'm pointing at with the screwdriver. It's literally a little notch cut into this edge here. But the rotor is pointing the opposite way. It's pointing back this way. So we are 180 degrees out of phase. This is not the correct position for top dead center for cylinder 1. So what we want to do is come back and turn the engine another full turn, 360 degrees, to get back to Z1, and then we'll check the position of the rotor again. All right, Z1 is right about there. And there it is. Once again, we're back at Z1, lined up with the notch on the fan housing. Now let's take a look at the position of our distributor rotor. And now the end of the rotor, remember previously the end of the rotor is pointing back that way. Now it's pointing up this way. And the notch is right here, right about here, rotor, cylinder 1. So we're good. This is the position that we want to be in. Now cylinder number 1 is in top dead center, and we can go ahead and proceed with the adjustment of the valves on cylinder 1. Cylinder 1, as you recall, looking at the decal on here, cylinder 1 is the rearmost left of the car. So let's get that one done first. Okay, here we go. Cylinder 1 exhaust valve. Normally I would go intake first and then exhaust valve next, just because it doesn't really matter which one you start with first, but I'm going to show the exhaust first because that's the one that is easiest to film. So bottom of the car, lower left side, cylinder closest to the exhaust, to the tail light. So all you need to do is, before you even touch anything, here's the gap that you are trying to measure. I hope you can hear this on camera and see it. You can hear the gap. That's me rocking the rocker on and off the cam. So right now, touching the cam, touching the valve. Cam, valve, cam, valve. Before you even get in here and start to mess with anything, just take your tool and you will see way underneath, you'll see the top of the valve, and you will see the adjustment screw, which is this guy right here with a little flat pad on it. And just measure it the same way we were measuring the gap with the calipers earlier on the bench. This is the feeling that you're looking for. You want to feel that slight drag, which actually I do feel right here. I don't really need to mess with it. It's difficult to photograph or to show on the camera, but we are actually not, we don't need to make any adjustment here. Let me see if I can move get a closer shot in here for you. Can you hear that? That's that same drag sound of the blade rubbing against the top of the valve and the adjustment screw. So this is a good gap right here. We don't need to adjust this valve. Here's another view of the feeler gauge underneath the adjustment screw and the valve, the top of the valve. You can see I'm moving it back and forth, and I can feel that it's actually a proper gap. So if I needed to adjust this gap, keep the feeler gauge in position so that it sets the correct gap. Come over here, grab the 13mm wrench on the adjustment nut, loosen it, lefty-loosey, like just a tad. That was maybe, I don't know, less than a quarter of a turn. Then grab your flathead, put it in on the end of the adjustment screw here. Hopefully you can see with this light. And then you can turn the screw in and out to set the gap. Now, you don't have to crank it way down, just turn it to where it stops turning. See here, this is loose. I'm turning it righty-tighty, just to where I can feel it, the end of the screw touch the feeler blade. And then what I like to do is look at the position of the slot. About right there. That's pretty good right there. I like to look at the position of the slot on the screw because that's what I'm going to be trying to retain as I lock it down. Then I want to keep it there, so put this back there on top of the screw. Now I'm going to lock this guy down. And give it a little slight, whatever that was, less than a quarter turn to tighten it down, and you're done. You don't need to, again, you don't need to crank on it too hard or anything crazy. That's should be tight right there. Let's give it another double check. Yeah, that's good. So now let's double check this again. Feels good. Feeler gauge still slides back and forth nicely. You can see me moving my hand, but that's it right there. Valve 1 lash set. Now we can move on to the intake valve. If you want to give it another quick double check, you can put this back on here. And again, you don't have to crank on it hard. Make sure that slot on the end of the screw doesn't move, and just slight finger pressure. That's what we're looking for. That's it. Back and forth, back and forth. That's a good gap. This valve is done. So the intake valve on cylinder number 1 is this gap feels quite nice. I don't need to adjust it, but if I did, I would adjust it from up here. The wrench and the flathead, and same thing, just unlock this partial turn, screw the screw down until it barely touches the feeler gauge, then lock the lock screw down, and you're good to go. Works Unfortunately, there's a bunch of room in here for my little screwdriver. But yeah, we are good with cylinder number 1, and now we're gonna move to the next one. With cylinder 1 now finished, we're gonna rotate the engine 120 degrees to the next notch on the pulley, again turning the engine clockwise, and we're gonna continue with cylinder number 6. And if you look at the decal in your engine bay, this is the order in which we adjust all the valves. We go cylinder 1, 6, 2, 4, 3, and then finally 5. So cylinder 6 is the one at the front right side of the car, way over there. And to do that, we're going to turn the pulley a third of a turn, 120 degrees, to the next notch. Okay. Fighting the compression here a little bit. And I had previously put some little paint marks on my pulley just to make it easier for me. And there's the notch right there. Got it right on. And now cylinder number 6. Okay, cylinder number 6 intake valve. It's in there. I'm being honest, it feels a smidge loose, so I'm gonna go ahead and adjust it. Okay, I just adjusted intake valve cylinder 6, and I actually had to remove the airbox air filter and the lid to give myself a couple more inches of room in here for my left hand, but it now feels excellent. If I had to describe the drag, is that you should be able to drag the feeler gauge through the gap with kind of moderate hand pressure. Not too light, and it can't get stuck either. Just there's some moderate, definite hand pressure required to move it around. But it's good right there. On to the exhaust. Okay, number 6, exhaust valve. This is actually perfect because you get a dead-on view of what's going on in here. And this one, the gap feels quite nice. But we're gonna adjust it anyway, just for demonstration purposes. So grab your 13 mil. In case you haven't noticed already, you're going to be fighting some of the studs and clearances to other things when you're locking and unlocking the lock nuts with the wrench. But just do what you can and have some patience, and shouldn't be too much of a problem. So put this guy here. Lefty loosey. There you go. Whatever this was. Quarter turn or something, I don't know. Slightly less than a quarter. Now, preferably with this hanging on, get on the screw, ever so slightly turn
the adjustment screw until you barely feel. This is actually a good exercise. When you, with the lock nut loosened, you can play with the gap and how much you crank down the adjustment screw. If you crank it way down, it's stuck. The feeler gauge is stuck, it can't move. If you loosen it ever so slightly, all of a sudden it moves. So just finger tight, turn the screw down just enough to where it'll still, the feeler gauge will still drag, give you that little metallic drag, and that's it. Then hold the screw in the right position, fixed, don't move it. And while you're doing that, lock the adjustment screw down. That's it. Move this out of the way. Check it again. And we're good. Feel the drag. Good to go. Cylinder 6 is done. Let's get ready for cylinder, what is it, number 2 now. All right, let's turn this 120 more degrees for cylinder number 2. Fighting the compression a little bit. There's the notch coming up. There, right on the money. All right, cylinder number 2, which is on the left bank in the middle. Right there. Intake valve number 2 feels good. Slight drag. I'm not gonna mess with it. Let's go to the exhaust side. Exhaust valve on number 2 feels great. I'm not gonna mess with it. On to the next cylinder. Next up, cylinder 4. There we go. And we're right back at Z1 again, but this is Z1 not at top dead center for 1, but rather top dead center for number 4, which is cylinder 4 is this one closest to us back here on the right side near the tail light. Number 4 intake valve is a smidge on the loose side, so I guess I'll adjust it off camera though. There, number 4 intake is all good again. Back under the car, number 4 exhaust is perfect. Onto the next cylinder. Okay, 120 more degrees for cylinder number 3. You could hear the compression. There it is. Getting closer. There. Perfect. Cylinder number 3 is the
one on the front right, way back over there. Front left, sorry. Number 3 intake feels quite nice. So thank goodness I won't have to mess with it. Number 3 exhaust is a smidge on the loose side. So we're gonna adjust it off camera. 3 exhaust feels better now. On to the next one. And home stretch, 120 more degrees to do the final cylinder. There we go. Perfect. And the last cylinder on our list is cylinder number 5, which is on the right in the middle. Number 5 intake valve is all good, no issue. So we'll leave it the way it is. Number 5 exhaust valve is a smidge on the loose side. So we're going to give it a adjustment. And number 5 exhaust is now snug again. Done. So now we finally covered all of the cylinders and adjusted all of the valves. So what were the results on my engine? Going in order from 1, 6, 2, 4, 3, 5. Both my valves are okay. My number 6 intake was a bit loose. And by loose, I mean like just a smidge. There was still drag on the blade, but not as much as on the these two, for example. Number 2 was okay. Number 4, same condition. It had just slightly less drag than the rest of them. And on both the last 2, 3, and 5, intakes were okay, and the exhausts were just a smidge loose, but they should all be adjusted properly now. If you want to double check your work, you can turn the engine over 120 degrees at a time again and go through and check each one, the clearance on each one in order, and just to double check your work. And by now all of your gaps should be reading okay on every single cylinder. After recording your valve adjustment results, I highly recommend that you capture the data in a maintenance notebook for your car, so that over time, every time you do a valve adjustment, you can always compare the clearances over time, and you can see if any valves are consistently loose or tight, and then you can potentially catch things like a valve that is stretching or a valve seat that is slowly dropping over time, and hopefully catch a catastrophic failure ahead of time before it happens. So not just for valve adjustments, but I highly recommend that you have a notebook so that you record all of the kind of critical maintenance items that you do on the car, so that you can keep better track of your car's health. So now I'm back at Z1, top dead center for cylinder number 1. And I went ahead and double checked the clearances on the valves of cylinder number 1 in this corner back here on the left, and they're still good. I'm not going to check the rest of them for the sake of making this video as short as possible, and I trust that I did the rest of the work correctly. But at this point, if you're all good and you verified that all of your valves are adjusted correctly, then you can go ahead and start to put the valve covers back on. One thing about valve covers that I wanted to point out is sometimes these valve covers are attached with a lot of goo. You can see, and I actually made this mistake myself. When I rebuilt the engine, I put I think it was Loctite 574, some orange sealant on the mating surfaces of the cam towers and the valve covers and the gaskets. It was great for sealing, but the problem is that it was impossible to service. And the first time that I went to go do a valve adjustment after my initial rebuild, during my break-in period, I had a heck of a time taking the valve covers off. And when I did so, all the mating surfaces were full of little bits of orange junk, and it was a giant pain to clean it all up and get the surfaces ready, nice and clean and flat, and ready to reassemble once again with fresh gaskets. I ended up having to use, I think, a razor blade very carefully so that I didn't gouge any of the mating surfaces and create an oil leak. You can still see some remnants of the orange goo that I had used, like for instance right there in the center of the camera. But in general, I got lucky and I cleaned up all of the mating surfaces really nicely with a razor blade, plastic razor blade, and some kind of goof off or some sort of solvent for glue removal. So learn from my mistakes. Don't put any type of sealant on the mating surfaces. If at all possible, try to reassemble them with brand new gaskets and assemble everything dry. That way you let the gasket do its job and you don't create any maintenance issues for yourself in the future. Before putting your valve covers on, give them a nice cleaning on all of the mating surfaces. This black stuff is some of the graphite residue from the old gaskets, and I'm just using a plastic razor blade here to get most of it off, but it's coming off. Try not to use a metal razor blade because you'll create little scratches that will turn into permanent oil leaks here. So just get as much as you can of any residue on here. Give them a light scuff, maybe with some Scotch-Brite or something, and pop them back on with brand new gaskets. And on the early cars, F bodies and G bodies, the gaskets are paper, impregnated with some kind of a graphite material, and the upper ones are different than the lower ones, just like the valve covers. These are the upper valve covers with the Porsche emblem on them, and you can tell which gasket goes where based on how many bolt holes there are, and also they kind of mirror the shapes in the valve cover castings. So these with the lots of little windows go on top, and they have 6 bolt holes. The ones that go on the bottom have, I think, 11 holes, and they have these 2 little rectangular looking things, and they go like that. But the same gasket works left and right, but not, the upper ones don't work on the bottom and vice versa. On 964, they are a rubber silicone seal that fits inside a groove on the valve covers, but we're not covering those for now. But yeah, go ahead and pop on 4 new gaskets and the valve cover is in place. New gaskets are on. Okay, I've got all 4 valve covers on now. Remember, on this lower left side, if you have an exhaust like my style with the catalytic converter and the crossover pipe here, remember the pry bar trick where you have to take these 3 nuts, loosen them so you can take a pry bar back here and scooch the flange over so that you can get the valve cover over the studs over here closest to the exhaust. You're gonna have to do that once again, but in reverse. So scooch the exhaust over, get the valve cover over the studs, and then you can put the crush washers and nuts on, and then you can tighten down the exhaust nuts and bolts over here on this side as well. As far as the torque sequence for the valve cover nuts, all I could find in any documentation was really to tighten them in a crisscross pattern as best you can. So I like to just take the outer ones and do them in a crisscross pattern, then the next inner ones in a crisscross pattern, and then the inner 3 in a crisscross pattern. And same with the upper valve covers, although that's only 6 nuts per cover. More importantly, is you should not over tighten them. They only require 6 foot-pounds of torque on each one, and they really are just kind of snug on here. And if you do find that afterwards you do have a tiny bit of weeping of oil anywhere, you can always come back in and snug them down just a tad more. But it's very important to not over torque them, because if you do, you might run the risk of warping the valve covers and causing a bigger leak somewhere. After you're done torquing down the valve covers, make sure you pop your distributor cap back on and pop your spark plug wires back in. Fortunately, you labeled them before taking them off, so it shouldn't take you more than a minute to do this. Quick tip on spark plugs is that on cylinders 1, 2, and 3 on the left side of the car, these spark plugs are angled. If this is straight across, they're angled slightly forward, if that makes any sense. And on the opposite, on the right side of the car, these spark plugs are angled slightly back. All 3 of them. So that's one thing to keep in mind. You can also get yourself this little mirror and take a quick look in there to understand in each spark plug hole, to understand the orientation of them before you pop the wires back on. That way you don't have any trouble connecting them. After you finish the valve adjustment and the oil change, take the car out for a test drive, and you should notice a few benefits. Number one, you should have less valve clatter at cold start and at operating temperature, and you may even notice a smoother running engine and a slight power increase. So definitely a worthwhile maintenance item to take on yourself. Congratulations, you have now successfully completed a valve adjustment on an air-cooled Porsche Flat 6. I don't know what the running rate is for a 2026 valve adjustment on an air-cooled 911, but it's probably not going to be cheap. So if this has saved you a few bucks and you've learned a few things, then please support the channel by considering going to my website and clicking on the donate button, or click on any of the links in the description below the video to take you to any of the Amazon products that are linked for this valve adjustment process. Or you can go to my store on my website and consider buying some of my air-cooled Porsche accessories that I designed myself. Otherwise, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next video.
Take care. Bye-bye.